Hi, I'm Garm1 from Midgardia RPG, and today I have with me Audrey from Hope Punk Press. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm Audrey, and I'm one of the co-creators of Spaceships and Starwyrms, which I know you guys have run on your stream before.
It's good fun. It's my favorite 5e sci-fi thing so far, so I'm a little bit biased here. You so you're here to talk about the upcoming Kickstarter you guys have, right?
Right, it launches on April 25th, which is a little over a month away as of this recording. So, go time. But we are hoping to do a print run of the core source book, which we released in December as a PDF. And we're also pushing out a new supplement that'll have two new classes, augmented classes, which means that they're based off of ones from original 5e. And basically, it's our bestiary. We're having more than 100 monsters in it, and we're going to do print and digital versions of that as well.
That's super cool. I always want more monsters for, well, to kill my players with. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, like I said, of all the 5e sci-fi things I've tried so far, Spaceships and Starworms is easily my favorite. Can you tell us about some of the influences for it?
We started out just wanting to make a sci-fi game. I grew up reading a lot of science fiction, and my co-creator Ben was influenced by a lot of, I think, anime. Like you got Cowboy Bebop, you got Trigun, you got some that he's watched that I haven't watched and I don't know as well. But we definitely took our influences from a lot of our like favorite sci-fi franchises and movies because we just feel that there's a lot of room to play, and you have this whole spectrum from hard sci-fi to like a space opera with all these genres in between, and we wanted to do that at our table, and that's kind of how things got started, and it just ballooned from there, and we got to a point where we decided we wanted to share it with the public.
Yeah, it's like the same kind of thing with D&D being the, collective cultural heritage of like Tolkien and whoever wrote Conan. It escapes me at the moment. Um,
Yes,
yeah, and then that for like sci-fi. That's pretty cool.
it's kind of what we were going for. We wanted there to be something for people who enjoy Blade Runner, people who enjoy The Matrix, people who enjoy Star Wars, Star Trek, Fifth Element, which is my personal favorite, just kind of across the board, wanted to make something that could be applied in a lot of different ways.
Right. And how does this compare to some of the other similar products on the market right now, like Hyperlanes, Dark Matter, Esper Genesis is the other one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So full disclosure, we started out making this without researching at all what sci-fi 5e was already on the market. We were just making it for our home table before it expanded into something else. And so now that we do have it out there and we know that there are other things out there, we've kind of looked into them. So Esper Genesis definitely sticks a lot closer to D&D than we do. We bring a lot more new content rather than just reflavored stuff. Um, I haven't personally played Hyperlanes, but I do think that theirs is a little more generic. They're just trying to give you a framework. We're trying to give you a setting and some more specific mechanics and flavor and species and things like that. And then Dark Matter, of course, isn't released yet. Their Kickstarter hasn't released except for I think the beta version, so I
Uh,
haven't had a chance to look at it.
the
But
alpha,
I have,
yeah, yeah. You can buy it on
yeah,
Drive Through RPG. But yeah,
it's their alpha playtest, right? I read
yeah,
through the document they had on their Kickstarter, and I think that they are the closest to us right now, in so much as they've created a lot of new content and kind of their own setting to go with the 5e framework. But I do have to say they did spaceships a little bit differently than us, and I kind of like the way we did it better.
yeah. The one thing I didn't really get to try out when we did Spaceships and Starworms was the
Mhm.
space combat stuff. Um, it looks pretty intensive. So for like a one session playtest, I was like, but that's
No,
not.
it is.
Yeah,
It is definitely for a single session because we've been running demo sessions in the St. Louis area, and
yeah,
we got some spaceship playtesting in there, but it's definitely one of those things that, unless you've had the time to really dig into it, it's one of the more complex parts of the system, and that's something that we really struggled to balance the whole time was the balance between let's get all of the intricate fun of like technology and spaceships that comes with the sci-fi universe but let's try and keep it simple the way that 5e usually is.
Right.
So that was definitely one of the things that we wrestled with for a really long time before we settled on the final rules. And I'm pleased with how they came out. And I think it's about as streamlined as we could possibly have gotten it. But it's still a big chunk to read
Yeah.
if you're trying to get it into your session.
Yeah, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means for a one-shot demo session, it's either going to be all spaceships or not at all.
That
Um,
is true. It's a lot harder to balance the time between that. And we've run some sessions too that are exclusively spaceship combat
yeah,
because we've tried to include some ways to make that really interesting if a fight drags on.
yeah. And I noticed that you have like a pilot maneuver system for it. Is that inspired by the old Star Wars Saga edition?
I cannot speak for that because that was conceptualized by Ben, my co-creator,
All
and
right.
he's played a lot more video games than I have and consumed a lot more visual media than I have. So that's a question for Ben. I would say probably it was influenced by something like that, but mostly we just wanted people to be able to have like a signature move or like to have some suggested like these are piloting maneuvers you can do so that you're not in space combat being like, I rolled a 15 on my piloting check. I guess I avoid stuff. It can be like I did this cool barrel roll or I did a maneuver that like hid me behind another ship. And
Yeah,
um, that's what we tried to build in.
yeah. For our playtest this weekend for the charity stream, I'm playing a pilot. I took the one that lets you
Yay.
take off really quickly because that seems like it'll be really useful. Um,
It's super good because it's like if you know how long it takes for your ship to start up and you're in a dungeon, you can tell the ship to start up if you have an AI.
well,
Like
that's
it,
handy.
so if you get a computer and you have like the AI uplink, you can be
Yeah,
like, "Hey AI, start the ship for me," and then you can tell your party, "We have this long before the ship's ready for takeoff."
I will not
It's
be nearly
awesome.
that calm. I'll be screaming into my wrist, "Start the ship! Start the ship! Start the ship! Start the
Yeah,
ship!"
that sense of urgency.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, this weekend there's a charity event on twitch.tv/midgardia. You'll be showing off some of the new content there, right?
Yes, we've got some new monsters for you guys that we've thrown your way to be previewed in the stream. And we actually posted the art of one of them on Twitter today, but nothing else about it. So you guys just get to find out in the game how that plays out.
Right. It was a horrifying spider thing. It looks super
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
Can
It
you
was like
tell?
a mold spider.
Okay, can you tell me how big it is? Is it
Well,
gargantuan,
it's a
tiny?
series of creatures. And so there's a multitude of sizes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah. There you go.
Well, at least I only have to live
That's a
in
good
fear for.
taste.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
least I only have to live in fear for a couple days. Oh yeah, and Mark Mears going to be there for that, which is super cool.
Yeah, we are super excited that you guys have been playing Spaceships and Starworms on your stream, and we're especially excited for the charity stream, both because we love the charity aspect of it. One of the things we did when we first launched was we ended up donating some to the Planetary Society, which is an organization that donates to discovering new planets and new planetary bodies. So that was really cool. So we love the charity aspect of it. And then, of course, Mark Muir, I just like had this mental version of a blue screen when I found out that he was going to play. So
Oh, so did we. We were like, hey, why don't we ask Mark Meir if he wants to play games with us? We're all just like, worst thing he says no, or we don't get a response. And he's just like, yeah,
right.
sure, why not? We're like, oh,
I'm like,
um,
Commander Shepard, holy crap, there is some Mass Effect influence in this game.
yup, and I'm from Edmonton, so like,
Right.
yeah. I think I've seen him in person once or twice, just out and about, but
That's cool.
yeah, he's a cool guy. Um, that poster just to your right, the big framed one. What is that? It looks
Okay,
super
so
cool.
I'm actually going to take this down and plug something real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so this is the poster for my husband's capstone film because we were both film students, and most people were kind of making your typical indie filmmaker like melancholy drama things, and he just
Yeah.
said, "You know what? No, I'm a visual effects artist. I'm gonna make an '80s action sci-fi." So I wrote it, and we filmed it all in one weekend, and cut it all together and did all the sound and stuff. But you can find it online at Magearc Zero. So it's fun, and that's definitely a large part of what my overall style for everything is. So Spaceships and Starwyrms will not be surprising how it came out stylistically because I did all the layout and design for it.
Yeah.
It won't be surprising at all how that looks once you've watched Mage Arc.
Yeah, I just punched that in another window. I'm gonna look that up later because
Awesome.
that sounds super cool.
We
And
had a fun time with it.
I am very familiar with the like typical indie film. I used to work at a like art housey kind of theater.
Oh, you get it.
Whew. I've seen the amount of movies that can be summed up as 60-year-old person sleeps around for an hour and a half and like that's it. It kills me inside.
Look, art house films have their place, but I liked fun cinema
Yeah.
personally,
And
so
and part of it's just Sturgeon's law, right? 90% of everything is crap.
right.
And
That's just how it works.
yeah, working in a theater, you see everything. So you see 90%
Exactly.
just trash. Um, tell me about the name of your studio, Hope Punk Press. I believe it's not what you originally started as on Drive Through RPG.
No, it's not. We started as Sage Games, and that was back before we realized kind of the magnitude of what we had and where we wanted to go as far as future products were concerned. So when we decided to set up an actual LLC, we became Hope Punk Press. And the reason we ended up choosing that name, aside from the regular struggle of what's not trademarked yet, what can I get the domain name of?
Oh yeah.
So aside from that, the real reasoning is that we were thinking about the kinds of stories that we like to tell and the kinds of games that we like to play. And the real reason that we originally created Starwyrms, which is to say that we have tragedy in our games and bad things that happen in our games, but we always like for there to be hope because it's one of those things that both Ben and I firmly believe is that you're the light in the darkness and we're all the light for each other. And that element can't be forgotten because it's so important. And that's the kind of story we want to tell. And so that's, maybe a little cheesy or overwrought, but it's very important to both of us. And in general, I think that with the setting that we've made in Starwyrms, there's a lot of opportunity for the bad, but there's also a lot of opportunity for the good and the colorful and the happy. And so that's where the Hope Punk name came from. And we want to keep moving forward with anything else we put out, whether that's Spaceships and Starwyrms related or other content that kind of fits under that nice umbrella of the Hope Punk genre.
Right. Kind of a counterpoint to the like grimdark kind of
Absolutely.
yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Speaking of the early days of Spaceships and Starworms, you guys didn't start with a Kickstarter, unlike almost every other 5e thing under the sun. Can you explain to me the reasoning there?
So two reasons. First of all, neither of us had ever done a Kickstarter or published anything before. So we were intimidated and didn't know the kind of response we would get to the product, even after all the time we had put into it. And so we were like, well, let's just release it as a digital thing because neither of us were financially in a place where we felt comfortable putting in all the money that might be required of producing a physical thing on Kickstarter. And like we could have done a Kickstarter for just a digital version, right? But we wanted to just kind of see how it fared first. I think we were both very cautious in that regard. It's also something that we've noticed that it didn't really occur to us that we could start a Kickstarter without having the content all written. So we have everything written already for both the core source book and the nature book, the Galactic Primer on Natural Environments, which is going to be a part of the Kickstarter. So the content's all already written for those. It just feels better to us that way. That way we're not delaying people from getting what they paid for, essentially.
Absolutely.
The second reason that we didn't do a Kickstarter to start with is mostly that I don't know, I might just repeat myself and say we didn't have a lot of experience with Kickstarter itself. And so as far as like a business perspective, we both have full-time jobs and we had full-time jobs the whole time we were working on this and weren't talking to like publishing companies about picking it up or anything like that. And so it was never really a thing where we thought, hey, this is maybe something that we should just pour all our time and effort into as a business venture. And now we're at a point where we were just kind of overwhelmed by the support that we got when we first launched the product. And we felt confident enough to go ahead and push forward with a Kickstarter. And, I know that there are some people who have the PDF and that's good enough for them and they won't back the Kickstarter, but we hope that there's enough people out there that want a physical version or want the new natural primer and and are looking forward to other content from us that'll support us, because it's really just our flagship Kickstarter saying, hey, build a community that supports Hope Punk and that likes our stuff, and we want to give you guys the best stuff we can.
Well, hell, that answers the question pretty well. Yeah, I actually originally found you guys. I check the new products on Drive Through RPG thing at least a couple of times a day. I'm one of those guys.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, and I saw that and I was like, well, shit, that looks like some good fucking art. Um, and
We've
then
tried.
yeah, and then I read the summary of everything, and within a couple of days I bought it because you guys did a good
That's
job making it
awesome.
sound good, and it's
We
entirely held
appreciate
up.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've had some really really great artists on the project, and we've been really fortunate to have that. And I wish that I was made of money so that we could have even more amazing artists. We are working on filling up the Galactic Primer with a whole bunch of monster art, which is awesome. But we definitely, just as we grow, we'll be able to facilitate that stuff kind of even better, and to have more of that kind of eye-catching thing that'll draw people in. So
yeah. I saw that you guys were looking to hire more artists for the primer. I did send
yeah.
some your way. I'm not going to specify who they were to avoid biasing you.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We're already in talks with a whole bunch of people just about commissioning monsters and various things for other parts of the book, which I
Yeah,
can't spoil.
yeah,
So
yeah. I had a couple of friends who were like, I don't know if I'm good enough, and I'm like, just do it.
just try it. We keep everybody on our list, even if they're not right for the current project,
Yeah,
because we don't know what we'll have coming up, and we don't know what kind of budget we'll have for projects coming up either. So there's
yeah.
always the chance that we'll be able to expand and include more artists as we go.
Yeah, and speaking of, you just said that you don't know what you'll do in the future, but do you have any vague ideas? Like, is it just going to be Starworms forever, or
We already have some ideas that aren't Starworms, and those will be definitely something that we'll talk about after the Kickstarter.
okay?
We have some 5e standard supplements and things coming up that have been developed by various members of our staff. We have some adventures for Starworms, so some full galactic adventure modules for you guys to play. And then we also have another system that is in very, very early stages of development. So I can't say too much about that yet, but it's definitely on our list of things to dive into once we kind of get over the Kickstarter hump and make sure that everything's fulfilled and taken care of for that.
Excellent. You mentioned earlier that you've done some layout work. The layout in Spaceships and Starworms is definitely one of the things that made me buy that. I just thought you should know. I've
Well,
read
I'm flattered.
I've read a lot of 5e stuff. Most of the layout is not good from a lot of publishers, and I hope they see how well this is sold and take some inspiration from that.
I appreciate that compliment very much. I'm a graphic designer by day, and I've been doing layout work for publications since I was in high school, which is a while ago now. And so I worked really hard to make Starworms look as professional as I possibly could make it.
Yeah,
And um it was almost 400 pages, and I did all of that. And so it was a lot of work. So it's really great that people appreciate the effort, because that's why I put in the work, is because I want it to be something that is as clear and pleasant to look at as possible.
yeah. There's nothing worse than like looking at a book and being like, it feels like it actively wants me to put it down.
Right, where you're looking at like two whole walls of text unbroken by anything else, and not even a paragraph break, and
and
like,
and it's in like
no.
some weird font, and
Right. That was something, oh my gosh. I'm a
yeah,
huge nerd about fonts. And so the very first thing when we were deciding to put this out there for publication was that I made this list of fonts, and then went through with Ben and said, we have to pick ones that go well together and that are going to work. And then like had to go pay the authors of the fonts and be like, we're using your font for our product. And I was a huge nerd about it, but I'm pleased with where we landed on it, because I think that it's very legible.
I am incredibly appreciative. I have you ever seen the 1990s World of Darkness stuff? Even the index
Oh,
pages for those are like, what? I can't read these names, man. What are any of
mm-mm,
these sections?
mm-mm.
Uh,
All bad.
Speaking of the older eras, what's your like gaming history? I guess.
Okay, so I prior to when I was in college, I had only played one tabletop game before, and it was a homebrew by some guy that I worked with that I got talked into playing for one session.
How'd
It
that
was very
go?
weird. It was me and a bunch of guys that I worked with, and the only thing I remember is that I played a rogue who had a spell cast on her by the wizard, and all the spell did was made me smell like fart for the whole session. So that's everything I remember. it
That's
was it was weird and it was very nebulous despite having like 50 spots to fill in when I made my character. Like the actual gameplay was super nebulous. And so then when I got to college and I was a junior, yeah, I was a junior, and my friends were like, "Hey, we know this guy who's going to run a game for us. It's Pathfinder. We think that you'll like it." And I was like, "Sure, I'll try it, whatever." And then ended up playing that game for like over 2 years
nice.
and made some of my best friends ever playing that. So I played a lot of Pathfinder. It's where I started. I am so happy to have moved on to 5e because Pathfinder has a lot of moving pieces that it doesn't need to have.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I started on
and
3.5, so yeah.
right, I was going to say 3.5 is comparable. So
Yeah.
I've played a little 3.5. I played Shadowrun. Gosh, I played, what edition did I even play of that? Third edition is what I started playing when I played Shadowrun, I think.
Yeah.
But I've played fifth too, and then a lot of other just like smaller systems that are a little more freeform. So like Fate and Fiasco, and I'm a huge fan of a system that can be learned and played in the same night. And so I play a lot of really small short form games. So like I backed Bluebeard's Bride. I love to play Escape from Triassic Park, a whole bunch of just like little shorthand games, because if I'm going to get into something that's going to take me longer than a single like couple hours sit down to learn, I want to be playing it for a long time. And we've just been playing D&D for so long that it's hard to switch over.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've done a good enough job with Spaceships and Starworms that it's like you spend a few minutes looking at it and you're like, "Oh yeah, it's not quite just 5e, but it's comparable." Like
That's the hope, is that having that 5e framework makes it so that you can jump in pretty much right away and add the new rules or a couple of the nuanced things from the classes or whatever as you pick it up. So
yeah.
that's kind of the idea. Um, my sci-fi gaming experience is like Shadowrun and then Edge of the Empire. I played in an Edge of the Empire campaign.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all I got. I just haven't found one that really worked out for me. Ben's history is like a mile long. He's been playing since he was like 8, so
Dang.
he grew up GMing.
Yeah.
So the technical side of things, he has been a great mentor and a great co-writer, because I've learned a whole lot about game theory and game construction in this process.
Yeah, and it shows in the product. Like I never found myself being like, "Where the heck is this in the book?" or any of that, which as I'm sure you know, is a huge problem with so many tabletop things.
It really is. It really is. And we just wanted it to be accessible for
Yeah.
people.
Uh, speaking of the 5e framework, one of my favorite
Mhm.
things about Spaceships and Starworms is the augmented classes. They're it's just slight tweaks of core classes to make them fit more properly in the setting. You can still use like the old archetypes for them. That's super cool. How did that come about? Because I've never seen that anywhere else.
We decided to do that basically because Ben had conceptualized the Adept a while ago, and we really loved the idea of that, but it was just too ridiculous to justify just copying all of the monk stuff and being like, it's a new class. Like, that just felt cheap, because it's not a new class. It's based off of monk. And then also, I was at the time playing an android barbarian whose rages function the way that the Vanguard's nanite surge functions. And so we looked at that and we said, okay, well, we've got two things here that are basically like mechanically what we need them to be, but they're just not flavorfully what we need them to be. Let's invent this concept of the augmented class so that we can reskin it as we need to for the setting to make it feel more appropriate. But then if someone, if you're just dying to play like a totem barbarian, you can still do that using the Vanguard.
Yeah, I love the Vanguard. That's what I'll be playing for the charity game.
That's
They're
awesome. I love it. It's one of the few classes that's really, really built to do melee in a world full of guns.
also barbarian that can hack. Barbarian that can hack.
I love it
I'm
so
I'm
much.
overjoyed by that. Um, Yeah, it's a nice
Yeah,
change
we
from just being like the barbarian equivalent is a big brute, no smart. You know.
right. We tried to give it something because, in 5e, a lot of the times your barbarian out of combat kind of falls back into that survival utility.
Yeah.
And we wanted to give them something equivalent to that in space, but something that also reflected, hey, you're a super soldier. Like, you're not some wild idiot who discovered that you're really good at fighting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of what the D&D flavor lends itself to.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so it's something we really enjoyed. And with the Galactic Primer on Natural Environments, we've got 2 more augmented classes coming out, and they have more mechanical changes than the Vanguard and the Adept, but they're bringing the Druid and Ranger to space. And since they're both inherently nature focused classes, there was a lot more tweaking required to make them work for a space game.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that works out. I've never actually played a druid or a ranger in 5e. I'm
Me neither.
I'm trying to work down my list of like every single class, but I just end up playing barbarians all the time because they're really fun.
You just fall back on them, right? But the
Yeah.
Druid and Ranger are actually the only 2 that I haven't played. And I feel like I could play a Druid now because we had to figure out something to bring them into space. But we're pretty pleased with the flavor changes that we've made for them, and we'll be kind of previewing those and showcasing those on our social media in the coming weeks. But definitely the focus for the plane shifter is we wanted to kind of refocus and say, you are good at shapeshifting, because in 5e, the moon druid just kind of beats out everything at shapeshifting.
Yeah.
And so we tried to make some archetypes that were as good at shapeshifting as the moon druid without like making the moon druid not a viable option to play.
Right.
And then we tried to make an option that doesn't really focus on shapeshifting, but you still have a lot of motivation to choose it and a lot of reason to choose it, just knowing what the focus is. And so that's kind of where the plane shifter is headed. And then the survivalist, instead of doing like a favored terrain, favored enemy kind of thing, we basically said our galaxy setting is divided into 3 places: the core, which is like your heavily trafficked area; the frontier, which is like, think Firefly; and then the outer reaches, which is like super sparse and space horror and that kind of thing. And so we basically said, pick one of those to focus on, and then also pick your archetype. And so you're getting some stuff from your regional focus, but you're also getting some stuff from your archetype.
That's an incredibly good way of handling it, actually. I would not have thought of that.
Oh gosh, it took us so long to get there, though.
Yeah.
This stuff has gone through so much like trial and error, and us just being like, no, that's a stupid idea the next day,
Yeah, I mean, that's always the thing, right? Because from out here, I only see what you put out, and I'm like, holy shit, you guys are geniuses, and we're like, and you're just like, nah, this is like the 500th idea, and it's the one that worked.
Yeah, well, and we sit there and we talk through it, and we had a third author with us on the Galactic Primer. And so the 3 of us just kind of were like, okay, everybody throw your ideas in the pot and let's just cross them off as we figure out that they're not going to work. So
that's a good way of doing it. Like you've got to, for creative stuff, you got to set up an environment where everybody feels, safe and comfortable sharing their ideas. Because sometimes the one that somebody isn't so sure of ends up being the one everybody's like, yes, that's the thing. That's what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm nearing the end of my questions. Last couple of things for you. What's your favorite new class?
Oh gosh, my favorite of
augmented
all of
classes
the new
are fine. That counts.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So I love the Vanguard because I love barbarians, but honestly, I love the Oracle. I loved it when we were playing Pathfinder. It was my favorite class that Paizo developed, and we ported it over to 5e pretty immediately. The version that you're finding in Spaceships and Starwyrms is a little more tweaking and a little more refining than the one we started with at our home table, but ultimately, I'm a huge sucker for the self nerf, for the whole build your drawback into your backstory kind of thing. And so the appeal of having like a curse in your backstory as well as your mystery that's giving you your powers is really appealing to me. And also we were really torn about magic in space and how hard sci-fi we wanted to lean, and I'm just glad we ended up not doing that. And so the Oracle, I think, is a really fun way to do magic in space.
Yeah, I mean, I love me some hard sci-fi, don't get me wrong, but not all the time. Sometimes you just want to be a laser knight beating the crap out of a guy on top of a spaceship.
Exactly. Well, and the reality is the way the flavor is set up, you could just cut the sorcerer and the bard and the oracle and pretty much have yourself a hard sci-fi game. Because the
Yeah,
only other people who are casting are the scion and the scientist, and those can be tweaked pretty easily to be it's
yeah.
science.
And
Well,
psionics slips into a lot of hard sci-fi things anyway.
right.
Good old Babylon 5. Um, is there any particular other aspect of spaceships and Starworms you want to bring up while we got you here?
Not in particular. We're just excited to share more from the Nakora Galaxy with everybody, and we hope that you'll support us on the Kickstarter. And please, please, please tune into the Midgardia stream on Sunday because we are really excited about it.
Oh, me too, and terrified. We're. I hope we don't die immediately. Um,
You won't. It's okay. We wrote a special module for you guys, so hopefully it's balanced.
hopefully. Oh right, and there's are there plans to sell down Drive Through RPG after, or
We're going to do so for charity, but we're currently working out the backside logistics of that. That's something that is on our list. But yes, the module that you guys play will be available, and the money will go to the charity that you guys are raising money for.
the Forging Hero Society? Yeah,
Yes, Forging Hero Society. So that money will go to them. We just have to look up the logistics before we get it posted, make sure we're legally in the clear as far as drive-throughs policies and everything like
yeah,
that.
and it's cross national, and that always makes it a little weird as well.
Yep.
All right, well that's really great to hear. Um, thank you for joining me on this. This was great. And
I'm really glad you asked. It was great to talk about, and you've been a great host.
thank you. And if you have any other projects, feel free to hit me up, and I will gladly do another one of these.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. And for everybody watching, come back on. They'll come back on Sunday for the charity game, and we also have regular games every Wednesday and Friday on Twitch.tv. They usually end up on YouTube about 24 hours later. And have a good night.